Hello and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. We're your hosts this evening. I'm Tobias and this is Will. Together we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you are all now members, provided you adhere to our philosophy.
Ex curiositas scientia.
We pledge to learn without prejudice, and we admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus we remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens and excites us and makes us hungry for more. Curiosity Club is made merry by our fellow artisans at George Brewery in Astoria, Oregon.
I'm Bob Hambly. I'm a partner in a design firm, graphic design firm called Hambly and Woolley. I'm the Hambly part. My wife is the Woolley part. When the slides come up, you'll see that our logo is a pig and a sheep for Hambly and Woolley. Fortunately, I'm the pig, and she's. I am here because I contacted Tobias and Will 2 months ago and said that I'm planning to take a 1-month sabbatical and travel across the United States, and I'd love to start here. And they said yes. So, well, almost here. So on Saturday, I flew to Seattle and rented a car, and I'm on my 3rd day of heading from here. My wife is gonna meet me in Buffalo, New York on October the 10th. And I have no plans and nothing booked. Wherever the road takes me is where I'm going. That, guys, is ultimate curiosity right there. So, am I supposed to start this here?
Yeah,
there we go.
Give it a second, it'll catch up.
I think it's the first time I've ever spoken to a group that's actually drinking beer. That's great. And I will join you afterwards. If I have one now, I'll get a little silly. So, why are there 284 holes in my new shoes? For those who can't read it, the lively stories behind the unusual and often functionless design details found in everyday objects. I want you to focus on design details. As a designer, I'm looking at not only graphic design, but everything around me, and I'm looking at these little details, and I go, what the hell do those do? Why are they there? Did they once do something? Why are they still hanging around? I started to pay attention to it, and it was really spurred on by an article that was in the Globe and Mail, which is the Toronto newspaper. Boy, I'm gonna date myself, 1996. And I read it, and I went, yeah, I think about this. I've met a couple other people here who go, yeah, I think about that. So I started collecting these stories, and I'm fascinated by it. So let me walk you through it. So here's Charles Eames, one of the world and America's greatest designers, him and his wife. The details are not the details, they make the design. Now, are we talking about a creative group here, like architects, designers, makers, craftspeople? We all know that the details really make the design. So as you pay attention to all these details, that's when you start to, as you look at them, where did these details come from? So as a graphic designer, here is my favorite logo of all logos. At our office, there's 12 of us, and I spearhead branding because I love branding. I went to school in Philadelphia as a trained illustrator, and I think the reason I like a little image, and that image has to do a lot of work. So out of all the logos that I've seen, this one I love, and I love it because, and I'm sure most of you know it, but it's because of the arrow in the logo. You all know about the arrow? Does anybody not know about the arrow? Okay, so if you look between the E and the X in the negative shape, there's an arrow, and that, just to me, classic beautiful typography and this arrow moving forward, and what better way to sum up a courier company than this arrow? Well, The details of getting that arrow are not so easy. Here's the designer said that he based it on these two fonts, Universe and Futura, mostly Futura. But if you see the negative space between the E and the X, it doesn't quite work. So a designer had to go in there and fool around with the X height and customize all these letter forms to get that to work just right so you get that. Now that's a detail, and that's what we do as designers. Anybody here? I'm a skier, and it took me years, literally years, to learn how to master. I skied on 204s, so if you put your hand up, my skis came up to my wrist, and they were perfectly straight skis, and they were racing skis, and it took me forever to, and I'm one of those guys, I'm old enough, I was taught to ski, my legs are perfectly together. And it was hell because they were straight. So about 10, 12, 15, oh boy, I don't know how long ago, parabolic curves came in. And it's interesting how one little detail of making a curve in a ski could make skiing so much easier. Now, did anybody learn to ski on straight edges? Thank God you did. You did. And yeah, and then when you got to the parabolics, it made it so much easier. And the logistics of it are interesting. If you take a straight line and you cut across a hill, the line is forcing it. If you take a curved line and you go across the hill, the curve wants to follow the curve, so you zip around. So somebody once told me, if you're an intermediate skier, parabolics will make you not a professional, but a very good skier, and if you're a crappy skier, it'll make you an intermediate skier. I got on parabolics the first time, and I was turning so many times I was dizzy. So somebody figured out that little tiny detail, and it revolutionized the sport of skiing. And we have the snowboard world to thank for that, because snowboards were designed that way. So details, when it comes to design, whether it's graphic design, product design, are mammoth. So I want to talk to you about some details that I've been following and trying to understand in these 4 categories. Oh, I guess I should tell you, I love to hear questions, but if you give me the luxury of rambling on for a little while, at the end I'm happy to answer whatever you have. So let's take a look at these different categories. Fashion. An amazing thing happened in 1849 here in your country. They found gold outside of San Francisco. I read a lot about the Klondike gold rush that happened 50 years later in the Yukon. And intriguing dynamics happen when there's gold rushes. And the big thing that happened with both is that people everywhere, and not just in America or North America, a lot of people just plain up quit work, like policemen, doctors, lawyers, and they said, I'm going to find gold. Well, it wasn't so easy to find gold it was easy to find gold if you got there early, but it wasn't so easy to get to San Francisco unless you lived in San Francisco. It was difficult to get out to California. Here's an early poster where steamships would take you down through Nicaragua, down to the Panama Canal, and they had a railway that went across, and you would come back up. So if you lived on the East Coast and you wanted to, remember there was no railroad at that time, you would take a boat all the way down through the Caribbean to the Panama Canal, take a railroad across, get on another boat, and come up, and that's how you got to San Francisco. This guy here decided he was going to do this, and I think you've heard of him. His name is Levi Strauss. And Levi Strauss came to California not to look for gold, but he was like a lot of other people who took advantage of gold rushes and said, I'm going to bring all the stuff that the people looking for gold are going to need, and I'm going to set up a general store. And that's what he did. He set up a general store. Well, the miners started coming into him and saying, we are going through our pants like crazy. And the reason they were going through their pants was for several reasons. When you got to the area that was gold, you literally would stake a claim. So you would find a part of the river, you would put a stake in it, go down to the claims office, say this is my part of the river. They would give you a claim for 25, 50, 75 yards, whatever it is you bought, and then that was your part of the river. You really didn't have time, unless you brought a tent, to build anything. You're gold crazy, so you're going after the gold. When you found gold, you typically kept it on your body because there were those people who came to the gold rush who said, I'll let you find the gold and then I'll steal it from you. So it was best to put the gold, I didn't mean to point you out there. So it was best to keep the gold on your body so that it was with you all the time. So between working in the creeks and sleuthing and panning for gold and the weight in your pants, they're going through like ripping them apart. So they go to this guy, Levi Strauss. He sees the opportunity and he's got a roll of canvas that he brought for tents. And he and another guy make the first pair of jeans. And the jeans, and I bet you a lot of us who have any kind of jeans on right now, mine aren't Levi Strauss, we're held together by these little rivets. So have you ever looked at your pants and gone, what are these little rivets here for? Levi Strauss put them on the jeans so that those jeans, between being denim and having these reinforcements, made the jeans really, really sturdy, and miners loved them. So here's what it would be like if you arrived and you're in the mud, in the creek, in the rocks all the time. Here's a guy with one of the very early pair of Levi Strauss jeans on. Here's a very early pair of Levi Strauss. You notice there's a button right here, shall I say? They eliminated those later in production because they started to scratch. Actually, they started to turn color due to failure to be extra clean after you went to the washroom. There it is, thank you. I like that even better. Now, I don't know about you guys. I have a little bit of, I have 5-pocket jeans on. Most people have 5-pocket jeans. I use the 5th pocket for coins, but I'm not carrying any gold with me. So this once had a purpose, and it was the purpose to carry gold so your pants didn't fall apart. And we're not carrying gold anymore, but it became a signature detail to these pants. Does anybody know what the 5th pocket in jeans are for? They had a purpose and they were with the original jeans. And it might help if you knew that the 5th pocket is a square shape. And it's something that miners had at that time, or people carried at that time, that we no longer carry now. Any guesses? Pocket watch. Exactly. Do you know that we didn't start wearing wristwatches until after World War I? They became popular for pilots. So miners, the people who told their time, kept a watch in there. Nonetheless, the rivets in your jeans no longer really serve a purpose. They're not there to hold your pants. I'm sure the seams are going to do the job. There's a close-up of them. These are called skeuomorphs. Have you heard the term? It's a term that is really kind of popular as of the last couple of years in the computer world, because there's a lot of skeuomorphs in things like phone rings or page turnings, the sound of, and I think the electronic computer world has sort of taken ownership of skeuomorphs, and it kind of disheartens me because I believe they go back further and are, and it comes from a Greek word. Skeo means shadow, and morph means form. So it's a shadow of a form it once used to be. So today, what I want to talk to you about is design features that over time have lost their original function. They once had a function, and now they become purely decorative, and for some reason we keep them around. I took this page out of InStyle magazine. It was all different kinds of trench coats. The trench coat is absolutely fascinating, the history of it. The trench coat was invented by Thomas Burberry. You've heard of Burberry? Burberry, the family, built or made heavy farmwear for farmers, like heavy weather oilcloth jackets, stuff for being outside. And Thomas Burberry came up with this idea of, he actually invented gabardine. And gabardine, most weaves run perpendicular to one another. I'm going to show you and talk into the mic at the same time. Most weaves are perpendicular. He invented gabardine, which runs on a 45-degree angle. And what he found with that was when the water hit it, it would automatically make it run down. And between that and treatments he made with the cloth, he designed a coat and went to the British military and said, I think I've got the perfect coat for you to use in warfare, trench warfare. And the British government loved it and they bought it. Every time I tell this story, I think of my grandfather. My grandfather, Dale, fought for the Canadians, for the Allies. He fought in in no man's land. He was a scout. He would go out late at night and try to find where the Germans were, and come back and tell the Allies where they are. He came back. He won the Victoria Cross once for when he saw the Germans coming and he had nowhere to hide. He lay down in a ditch and pulled a piece of wood over himself, and the Germans walked right over top of him. Anyway, when I think of that, he would have been wearing one of these trench coats. So the trench coat is full of skeuomorphs. So did anybody own a trench coat? I usually, if I was home and I could bring a bunch of stuff with me, I'd put a trench coat on right now and walk you through it. But I have photos of it. So there's men in trench coats. What was great about a trench coat, essentially, you were wearing a tent. It was big enough so that if you crouched down, the coat would come right down all around you and would protect you in the trench from the rain and all the elements. So, first thing, the trench coat has, a typical trench coat has on this side a reinforced shoulder. Some trench coats have both. That is for the gun, and when it shoots, to give you extra padding, so when the gun kicks back, it gives you padding. I don't know how many women wearing the nice, Burberry trench coat need to worry about the kickback of a gun. Or men. There's a sleeve with its own separate little belt. That was so that you could tighten the sleeve of the belt so cold air wouldn't go up into your coat. The pockets had a hidden slit inside, so you could put your hand in the pocket. You could go behind the pocket into a slit. It allowed you to put both your hands right down into your crotch so that you could keep really warm when you were bent down. And these are D-rings, and they're for grenades. And let me just go back. On the shoulder are epaulets, and that's the next thing I want to tell you about. So the trench coat is the single item that I found with the most skeuomorphs in it. So shoulder patches, slits into your crotch, little belts on your wrists, and hooks for grenades. Not sure we need those. So let's talk about epaulets on the shoulder. Anybody wearing a shirt with epaulets right now? Epaulets is a French word meaning little shoulders. I like to call them the hairbrushes. You know the hairbrushes that sit off your shoulders? Fascinating story about they served a real purpose. And they really came to fore in Napoleon's army. And they were designed to designate your rank. So if you look here, you'll see, it's a little bleached out. You'll see some uniforms where there's two, some where there's just one. See the one at the top in the middle? The white has just one yellow. And they're all different colors. These signified what your rank was. So that if you were an infantryman and you saw people on a horse, you would know what their rank was from a long distance away. You can imagine that the hierarchy of all the people, you needed to know who was giving you orders and what their status was. And the epaulets were a visual signal to say, here's what my rank was. It was also really good to tell the enemy who was in charge, so really stupid, right? It's like when the British came over to fight the Americans, and the Americans went, well, thanks for wearing red coats, guys. It's kind of easy to pick you out. So the epaulets over time lost their significance as far as having to designate the rank of the person wearing it, and became just little loops. During the Civil War, artillerymen, have you ever seen them when they have little half domes on them, like little half balls? That meant you were an artilleryman. That meant you were the person who was firing the cannon. So they started to signify ranks, but lower down throughout the army to make people feel kind of special. They are not, you can sometimes now we'll see it where you'll see in a modern uniform they'll have chevrons or stripes. Sometimes those stripes are echoed on the epaulette as well. But really they're not useful anymore. People said they were designed to hold berets or hold a bandolier in place. Not true. They come from the hairbrush to tell you what your rank was. Did you ever wonder what those little flaps were on the back of a sailor's? I was working on a photo shoot, and one of the stylists said, "Bob, I think I have something for your skeuomorph collection." And she's from Ireland, and she said, "They're jumper flaps." And I went, "What is a jumper flap?" I don't know, in Britain they call a sweater a jumper. So this is a flap that's on the back of the jumper. So guess what? These served a really good purpose. Once. Way back when if you were on a sailing ship, big tall ship, a 3-mast ship with all kinds of rigging and ropes, most sailors wore their hair really long. And they did it because that was the style and no one was there to cut it. And when they started climbing the ropes, they did not want to ever, and I think that was very dangerous. If you can imagine in heavy weather and storms, if you fell, you could get all tangled up. So what they did is they put grease in their hair to hold their hair back, put it in a ponytail, so that it was under control, especially when they were going up on the ropes. When it came time for them to get into a dress uniform, the grease from their ponytail would stain the back of their uniform. The jumper flaps are there to protect your uniform from the grease of your ponytail. So here's some Danish soldiers, and I don't see any ponytails there, but for some reason we keep them around. So that's what jumper flaps were originally. And then that got me thinking, what are bell bottoms for? Now, bell bottoms came way before the 60s when they became really cool, and I guess sort of now. And lo and behold, they had a purpose too. And I heard about this, and when I found a photo of it, I went, people have said that they're for buoyancy. If you go over ship into the water, they're buoyancy. But that's not the case. Here's why they had bell bottoms. It made them easier to roll up, so when you were cleaning the ship's deck, they wouldn't get wet. And those pants were wool or made of heavy material, and if they got wet, they'd just make you heavier. So it's much easier to roll up a pair of pants that flares out at the bottom. You can roll them up, do all your work, and then roll them back down. And that's why bell bottoms came about. I was telling Will that every time I give one of these talks, I ask people if you have any ideas of skeuomorphs, please let me know, because I've been collecting them for coming up to 20 years now, and I've gone a long stretches where I haven't come across any new ones. Well, I came across a new one last year, and it's baseball socks. Now, do you see how there's 2 socks there? So there's the blue outer sock, but then there's a white one inside. So if you played for the Boston Red Sox, you'd have red socks, or I guess the Cincinnati Reds, you'd have red. I'm from Toronto, so the Blue Jays wear blue. And over the years, the rules on how you wear your pants and what you do with your socks have really changed. If you look at, I think in the 50s, it was mandatory that you wore shorter pants just below the knee and you wore socks. Nowadays, if you look at a baseball team, they're wearing their pants right down, like really, have you noticed, super long, like too long, almost like you're gonna trip on them. And some people wear them more traditionally up, and everything in between. The socks came about to identify the team, but what they found was when baseball players would slide into base, so mostly for second, third, and home base, they would slide with their cleats first, and this would go back to the 30s and 40s in baseball. They would actually sharpen their cleats, come in first, so it would scare the hell out of the baseman, so that they felt intimidated, and it could possibly cut them. And if it did cut you, and if it cut you in your leg, they found out, this is a crazy story, but it's true, the dye that they used for the socks was poisonous. So if the cleats went through the socks and punctured you, there was the potential that the dye could run in and poison you. So the baseball league made it mandatory for you to wear sanitary socks. So the white socks to this day are still called sanitary socks. And the sanitary sock would prevent the dye from going into your open wound. And that's why they came about. Well, guess what? We figured out how to make non-poisonous dyes, and we really don't need to be wearing them anymore. So it's a total skeuomorph. It once served a purpose, but no longer does. So I went online, there are new baseball socks, and there's the sanitary socks, and I absolutely love this one company. You can barely see, that's all knitted out of one sock. It's all, that little strip is all jig-jag because it's all knitted in, so they've actually made one sock to make it look like it's two. So let's roll on to architecture. Gargoyles. Why are there gargoyles on churches? Now, some religions would tell you that it was sort of a propaganda tactic to keep pagans leery or wary of the church, that it had this great power. But it completely came down to architecture, and it was a way of, they were eavesdrops. They were directing the water away from the roof, and they stuck way out. So in a classic gargoyle, there's a tube or there's a hollow thing that comes right out the mouth, and when it rains, it takes the water off the roof, and it shoots it way out past the foundation, because the foundation walls were not nearly as sophisticated as what we have now with weeping tile, so they needed the water to get away. So here's a church in France, and it's hard for you to see. It has, on this side alone, it has 23 gargoyles. And what they loved about gargoyles was, why most gargoyles are humans or animals, is because when the water came out, it actually looked like they had sort of come to life. The word gargle comes from gargoyle, because the noise that gargling made was similar to the water coming out of a gargoyle. This is the City Hall of Toronto. There is no opening there. There is no water. There's no opening for anything to come out of there. It is strictly decorative. So they once served a function. They no longer do, but we keep them around because a church, an important building, is supposed to have a gargoyle. A wingback chair. Wingback chairs were put in castles to protect you from drafts. Castles were completely full of drafts. That's why they had big tapestries on the wall. They had fireplaces in every room. So a wingback chair, you could sit back, and these two big things would protect you from the draft in the room. I love this picture here. The guy's actually looking in a mirror, and he's probably saying to himself, did I actually buy this chair with this pattern? This is the ugliest chair in the world. And that's That's why a wingback chair is a wingback chair. Here's a wingback chair with, it escapes me. What's this called? Pardon? Yeah, there's another name for it. Anyway, you know what? Those ones had a function. Those little buttons go in, they attach a rope, and they hold all of the stuffing in place. Otherwise, because stuffing back then was horsehair and burlap, it was not, a solid piece of foam as we have today. I'll think of the name on the way home. All those little buttons would hold, in behind were little pieces of rope that went in and tied everything in place. We no longer need to do that, so it once served a function, now it's decorative. Product design. I think this is one of my favorites of all of them. That's Henry Ford in front of his Model T. And you know that the Model T, the thing right next to him, between the two headlights, is the radiator. And it's filled with water. And you know the classic old stories that the Model T would get overheated and it would start to steam. And early cars, they used to carry big containers of water, either on the side running boards or at the back, so that when you were out traveling, if your rad or your engine overheated, you would stop the car, go out. You would always make sure you had a rag or a glove, because that little nozzle would get really hot, and you would pour your own water into the car. Now, I'm not a real mechanical guy, but essentially what it is the wind would come through the rad, which was filled with water, cool the water, and in turn cool the engine. And that's the purpose of it. We still have them nowadays. It's there to cool down the engine. A guy came along and started a company called the Boyce Motor Works. And he came up with the greatest idea. He said, I'm going to put a little meter, I'm going to sell, you can take the little cap off, and you can buy this thing from me. I actually have a replica of one, but I didn't bring it with me because it weighs a lot. And you can put it in the top of the rad in place of the little cap, and it has a circle on the front with a little tiny clear tube. And what happens when water heats? It rises. So this little tube, you would see a bubble rise up, and it would give people about a 10-15 minute heads up that their engine was about to overheat. So rather than waiting for it to happen, which you typically had to do, all of a sudden this little attachment allowed you to see it. And this thing sold like hotcakes. And what was interesting about it is, so when you were driving your car, it was out in the front of your hood, and you needed to see the little tube. So on the front side of it, they made it solid. And the car companies started buying these from Boyce Motor Works, and they put their logo on the other side. This is the beginning of a hood ornament. Why are there hood ornaments? This is how they started. So within about 3 years, the car companies figured out, why don't we just run the tube right underneath the hood of the car and under the hood of the car and bring it right up into the dash. So the Boyce motor meter went from the hood right into your dash. So it's much easier. I just lost the mic. To read it. I'm convinced also as a graphic designer, that's why most are in a circle. It goes back to having it in a circle, designing a logo so that things are look well. So there's a close-up of the Boyce motor meter, and there's the little tube. Typewriter. We all work on computers. I'm looking at one here, and it's the QWERTY type key. QWERTY, QWERTY. There have been many, many different designs that are much better, much more efficient. Let me show you. Here's an old diagram of how to use, how to learn on a keyboard. And there's a little zigzag line through the middle. Everything to the left of that hand was for your left hand, and everything to the right of that was for your right hand. The majority of the people in this world are right-handed, and you can type 500 more times the number of words with the left-hand side of a QWERTY keyboard than you can with the right side. But most people are right-handed. So it makes no sense that we keep it around. The reason the letters were divided up, if I go back, it was because when the keys came up, they would get jammed. Has anybody here ever used a typewriter?
Yeah.
So you know when if they would come up and get jammed. So they really designed a typewriter to divide them so that they didn't hit each other as much. We don't have to worry about that anymore. There are much, much better, as I say, much better, you want that?
Microphone.
I guess I don't really need to hold this. It's just become decorative.
It's your hood ornament.
My hood ornament. So, it has been proven that there are keyboard designs that are much better. It's just that nobody wants to make a commitment to it. It would cost a ton of money, all kinds of advertising and marketing to be able to get you to convert over. And it's one of those things for a silly reason that we put up with. So it once had a reason, and that was to prevent the keys from touching one another. Well, after a roller ball and after we got rid of them and went to this, we no longer need it. It's just, is it decorative? I think it's just stubbornness. Here's a really interesting one. This is one of the first examples ever of a dust jacket. Dust jackets came about in England, and they were a means by which to protect books from coal dust. That's why they're called a dust jacket. The British used coal for heating, for everything, and it was really dirty. That's also why most umbrellas, classic umbrellas, are black. Because when the rain came down, it would catch the little particles of coal dust, and when it fell on your black umbrella, you wouldn't be able to see it. But I guess it got to the point in Britain where coal dust was just horrible. Like not only made for filthy interiors of houses, but exteriors, and it was obviously not good for your lungs. But it wasn't good for booksellers because these beautiful brand new books would come along, and to protect them, these original dust jackets actually wrapped all the way around the book and were sealed with a little bit of wax. Then it got to the point where they just put it around so you could open the book, and they initially sold advertising on them because the purpose of a dust jacket was you got home and you immediately threw it away. It was just for you to get the book from the book dealer to your house and protect it. If you own a copy of The Great Gatsby, original first printing, just the book is worth anywhere between $8,000 and $12,000. If you own the book with the original dust jacket, and the dust jacket is in really good, like mint condition, the book is worth $250,000 to $500,000. This is probably the most expensive dust jacket ever. It serves no purpose. It's just that it's with one of the greatest books ever written. So if you find a book, any classic book, and it has a dust jacket that's in really good shape, buy it, keep it, save it, find out how much it's worth. People will go to the extent of forging dust jackets to try to get up the value of their books. So that's why they're called dust jackets. They once served a purpose to protect it from coal dust. We really don't have to worry about coal dust anymore, but we keep them around. And that brings us to the shoe with 284 holes. I don't know if there's 284 holes. I just really, I like the number 284. There's probably more than that in each. This is a pair of brogues. Anybody own brogues? Yeah, I finally bought a pair. I've talked about these and I thought maybe I should have a pair. I'll tell you another story in a bit, but I thought, why are the holes there? Well, this is a fantastic story. And this goes back centuries, and it's all because of this guy right here. Brogues, or holes in shoes, go back to Gaelic culture in Northern Ireland and Britain, and they would hunt this animal for food, for the antlers. They use the antlers for tools and for weapons, and they would use the skins for clothing. And when they hunted deer, this is the landscape in Scotland. I've been there a couple of times, and it does look exactly like this, maybe even more raw and barren. They would chase a deer forever and ever, and they got to the point, early shoes, they would take actually the deer skin, and they would wrap it around their feet, and it would come up the calf of their feet. As they were chasing the deer, they would run through water or marshes, and to keep the water out of that, they punctured holes in it. So as they kept running, the water would ooze out. There's early Gaelic. You could see the strapping the deer skin on the feet, and there was a whole tunic or whole outfit made from deer skin. So it once served a function, and that was to keep your feet, or at least to dry them out. It's a little bit hard to tell. This is a British company called Jeeves and Hawkes, and I was in London. I've only been there twice. The first time I went to a Jeeves and Hawkes store. I wanted to buy these. It's a little hard for you to tell, but on the toe, they took the classic pattern of the brogue circles or holes and made it into gunshot to look like somebody had shot a shotgun, and it splattered these holes into the front of the shoes. And I thought, you guys don't know how close you are to the basic story of hunting, of the origin of what brogues are all about. The shoes were crazy expensive. I loved them. They looked beautiful, and I couldn't even afford one, let alone two. Evolution means change, and change means stress. So we are not the kind of culture that likes change. Even positive change. The most positive change in your life, they say, are getting married and buying a house. They're positive steps. They are two of the most stressful things that will happen to you in your life. Am I right? So things are always going to change, but stress always comes with it. However, tradition, if we keep things the way they are, they're familiar, they're comfortable. We don't have to worry about change, and they give us great comfort. So my theory is that skeuomorphs stay around because they make us feel comfortable. They attach us to the past. They attach us to older stories, and they connect us with the history and why we wear or sit or drive or use certain things. And this is a little excerpt from the newspaper article that I read that I think is so great. Skeuomorphs are born of human insecurity. And since we usually fear the unknown, the vast majority of users are reassured if the new ways of doing things share some of the trappings of the old. Long after an initial solution loses its function, it survives as ornament. I read this, I guess, 19 years ago, and I have collected, I think, 26 different examples of skeuomorphs. If you have anything you want to add to this, or you know any other examples, please let me know. It took me 3 years to come up with the baseball socks, and I was so happy to hear about it. And Will told me that he's near and dear to this. Do you have one?
Well, I have two that are unconfirmed, but
Yep.
And it makes sense to me, but it was to shed water on the seams because, like the Burberry fabric,
Yeah.
called
The gabardine.
gabardine, if you've got a route for the water to go at the seam that's like, hey, go down this long thing and then drop off like a gutter or something, it's going to follow that and then it's going to shed outside of your jacket instead of inside your jacket.
I'm
you've got
so going to look that up.
going makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Another one is, and my dad told me this years ago, and I've never checked it, but I think about it all the time. When you look at columns, you have this very traditional column, and it's got lines down it. You know, it's got like
Yeah.
indentation, almost a corrugated. And then it's got a band, and then it's got kind of this scroll work at the top, right?
That's a
Very
Doric column.
Yes,
Yeah.
so what he said was that, and he was full of shit sometimes, but generally not. And what he said was that it was about what they had to work with when they made really old temples or architecture. They didn't have large timber, so they banded it together at the top and the bottom to support more weight. And so it represented, like, I don't know, the olive branches or whatever the heck they were using, banded at the top and the bottom with the leaves coming out on both sides, and then the corrugated things represent the different trunks. Those are two examples that I have no idea are actually true, but I've always thought.
See, I would have thought columns would have gone way before wooden columns back to stone columns where they wouldn't have that issue.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, some other quick ones. The one thing I was going to tell you, if I put my brogues on and my jeans, and if I wear a button-down shirt, and a trench coat, I'm a walking, living skeuomorph. A button-down shirt is a skeuomorph that's once served a purpose. Have you heard of a company called Brooks Brothers? The Brooks Brothers, Americans, went over to Britain and watched the Brits play polo, and the Brits had put buttons on their shirt collars when they were playing horse polo to prevent the shirt flap from coming up and hitting them in the face. The Brooks Brothers went, wow, that's cool. They brought it back to America. My father, who's no longer alive, I really shouldn't tell you this, but he said, I could never wear button-down shirts because it looks too American to me. And he meant that in a nice way. Little did he know that it was British. It had nothing to do with Americans whatsoever. It was British. Cuffs on pants, we all roll them up, but you know when you have trousers that have it built into it? That was from King George V, who was a real dandy. He really loved fashion, and he would set fashion trends. He watched cricket players and tennis players in Britain playing, and tennis players played with long white wool flannel pants, and cricket players played with the same. And they both played on grass. Tennis was played on grass initially. To prevent them from getting dirty or wet, they would roll them up a cuff. And King, I want to say it's George V, one of the kings, whoever this dandy was, saw that and he went, that's fantastic. And he started showing up at functions and parties with his dress pants with a cuff on it. He completely set the trend and everybody started wearing a cuff. He's the same guy who became rather portly and couldn't do up the bottom button of his vest. Everybody thought he was setting a trend. Have you ever noticed that? You're not supposed to do up the bottom button of your vest. It was because of this guy. He literally couldn't do up the bottom button of his vest. So I have many more examples than each one of these. Anybody else have any that come to mind? Yeah.
I have a couple more about shoes. I worked as a cobbler for a handful of years.
Yeah.
So a couple things when you were talking about the brogue shoes, one thing that came to mind was notched heels. How if you look at like a really fancy men's shoe, and it has to be a men's shoe, on the inside of the heel, often when they're trimming it out, they'll take a notch off the center because the way that men's pants are tailored, from the front to the back, they give like a kind of a slope, whereas women's pants are straight. Traditionally, I mean, I'm sure it's different nowadays, but when men's pants, when they would walk, if you walked forward, if that
They would
corner
get
was
caught.
left raw, it would catch on the corner of men's pants, and so that's why they started notching heels for the way that the pants were tailored.
Great.
And
I've
another
never
one,
heard that. That's a good one.
And then another one about heels is that also really fancy men's shoes will have this. And then not so fancy men's shoes will replicate this, but it's a look of having, it's what's called a combination heel that's part leather and part
Yes.
rubber. The leather part on top is usually totally decorative these days because they make the rubber go all the way through to act as a water barrier.
Right.
But back in the old days, it used to be an all solid heel, and they would only put one piece of rubber on the back of the shoe where you hit the ground the most.
Yes.
Because rubber was more expensive those days.
Ah, interesting. And you have one?
Two, possibly.
Okay.
One would be that bane of all of our existence, the necktie. So I think it was originally a symbol of rank in the Serbo-Croat. Remnant of cavalry, the collar on a shirt. Originally, once you transition from full plate armor to gunpowder, you would still, get into skirmishes with a saber, and you'd want a little piece to protect the neck because that's a lovely bit to slash at. So you'd have the metal gorget, and then the poorer rank and file and the peasants would have leather, thus to protect kind of those
Good
lovely
one.
arteries there.
Good one. Never heard that one either. That's great. Anyway, that's it. If anybody, Will's got more.
I just have one question. It came up when you were talking about black umbrellas. Does that play into like the European, like black with like a white undershirt but a black pants? It was because of the coal in the air? Because it seems almost like it would be the
I
same.
don't know how far the coal thing affected, if it actually affected a tire. My guess is it probably did, overcoats and even carriages.
Yeah.
That's one I didn't show you is, do you remember if you go back to cars, there was a T-Bird in a Thunderbird, I think in the 60s, where the doors, they're called suicide doors, they opened up like this. That's completely from a British carriage, because remember that cars are directly derived from horse carriages. So the spokes in the wheel of that same T-Bird would have all little spokes, so that was harkening back to a horse carriage. The doors open like this, and the S-shaped piece of metal at the back, what's the name of it? That's when you folded back the hood of a carriage, this S-shaped hinge would allow it to fold down. And the T-Bird also, and other cars had this little S-shaped detail at the back in the exact same spot, right behind the rear window, to mimic what it would look like when it came down. So there's this one particular T-Bird that has, sorry, I don't remember the name. The S-shaped hinge, the spoked wheels, it has the suicide doors, and I show a picture of that next to the carriage, and it's remarkable how similar they are, only they're, a century apart. Yeah.
Why are they called suicide doors?
Because they would, there was not a Cadillac had them too. Because you imagine if you're a passenger or a driver and you open your door and a car comes this way, it would push the door back in. If you open it that way, it would stop the car. It would just cause more problems because it becomes, if it's this way, it goes with the inertia. If it's this way, it stops the inertia and forces things back in. So they're called suicide doors.
And if you're driving down the freeway at like 60 and you decide to try and like open your door and close it really quick, it just sucks you out the side.
Yeah, we catch the wind. Did you? Yeah.
What if you try to jump out of
The
the
reason
car?
why the suicide doors were actually a rollover was because a lot of carriage companies actually rolled over into making cars. So like Studebaker and Oldsmobile,
Yeah.
they were huge carriage companies. Studebaker had been making carriages for about 100 years before they started making cars. But the reason was they were making carriages that had those doors that opened backwards. So when they started making cars, they just naturally started
Yeah.
making them the same way because they were like horseless carriages.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
right.
why the suicide door lasted up until the 60s. But then there's like the women's bicycle frames, with like the bar that goes down to the door skirt.
Right, right. Yes.
I don't know anything about wine, but I did hear this when I was on a wine tour, is that there are rose bushes at the end of a lot of rows of grapes, and it used to be that that was kind of their, I hate this word, canary, am I saying right?
Canary?
The bird that goes in the coal mine. Canary, thank you. That was essentially their canary, because roses would pick up on diseases more quickly and start
Earlier.
to die out, so then they would know that that row was susceptible to disease. But they keep it now, even though they have faster ways of
Yeah, it's more,
detection.
it's a tradition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a good one I just remembered. The symbol for, what's the universal symbol, at least or in North America, for hospitality? Pardon?
Pineapple?
Pineapple. And I thought, what? Have you ever seen that on a guest house or a bed and breakfast?
Yeah.
It's a pineapple. And I started thinking to myself, why a pineapple? So it's one of the few graphic design skeuomorphs, but it once served a purpose, and the story is amazing. It has to do with American captains of ships, primarily in the American South, who would take their ships down into the Caribbean and get tropical fruits, and they would bring pineapples back. And when a captain came back after being away at sea for many months, he would take a pineapple, a real pineapple, and put it on top of a pole and put it outside his property. And that was the way that he and the family announced to everybody that the captain was home, because no one had seen a pineapple. They couldn't bring back many because they couldn't keep them, and they were very valuable. It got to the point where captains would bring back pineapples, and people in the town would actually contact the captain and rent the pineapple for a party. I'm having a dinner party, can I rent your pineapple? And put it as a centerpiece. So, because it told you that the captain was back, and it was also encouraging you to come visit, come and see him. He's been away, you want to see him again, hear his stories. It became the symbol for goodwill and hospitality, and that's why you see it a lot in bed and breakfast. Yeah.
If the logic behind the QWERTY keyboard is so that the letters don't tangle when you're typing,
Yeah.
what's the reasoning behind the European AZERTY kind of layout? Is it something that was more?
I'm not familiar. Do they have a different layout?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's something that even at like a Apple store you could buy a Mac with an AZERTY keyboard.
AZERTY, and is that
It's the
the letters?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Oh yeah.
I'll have to look that up. My guess is it's probably very similar.
Yeah.
But the roots probably
I just
go
want to
back.
know if it was also
I never knew
this
that.
distinction at the typewriter age, or we just now because maybe I don't
My
know.
guess it has to go back to typewriter.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But I'll look into it. That's good. I never heard that.
Yeah.
So now you will be looking for skeuomorphs everywhere you go. And if you find them, please let me know. I would add it to my collection. So thank you very much. I appreciate you coming out. And now I can have a beer and join the rest of you.
No problem. Thanks everyone for coming out. We returned September 29th with illustrator Marcella Kriebel with her talk, An Illustrated Cookbook, A Journey from Creation to Publication. Marcella will share the story of how her cookbook, Mi Comida Latina, came to be. From learning recipes as she traveled to designing page layout on a light table, Marcella's book began as a project intended for family and friends. She will discuss her art practice, her interest in illustrating recipes, and her experience producing a hardback book in the USA thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign. Her book is now available nationwide through Burgess Lee Press. Should be really good. Let's have another round of applause.
Now, if anybody's interested, I'll do a little bit of self-promoting. I am doing this road trip. I'm an aspiring photographer, and I actually lecture a lot to people about curiosity. That's why I contacted these guys, because anything to do with curiosity fascinates me. And I think the world needs more curiosity. It needs to be encouraged a lot more. And I could go on and get on a soapbox about curiosity. So when I found that you guys were doing this and been following it for a couple of years, I just loved it. But I decided, when I lecture to students and designers and interior designers and all different kinds of interior designers, all kinds of different people, about how important curiosity is. And I thought, I'm a pretty curious guy, and I thought I have to push it further. And I think there's five components to being really curious. First is you have to be a good observer. And if you are a good observer, you can always be a better observer. Number two is I think that you have to inquire. You have to constantly be asking questions. Never be satisfied with what you know. There's so much to learn. Number three is that you have to challenge what's out there. That's what makes good design good design. The best story I can tell is the woman Deborah Adler? No, Deborah, sorry. I'm on vacation. Who designed the medical bottles for Target. It was a school project. You know the ones, have you seen them? Should have done my curiosity talk. They're a sloped, flat side bottle that she designed as an art student in New York City. Her teacher, you had to find a project that was near and dear to you. Oh, thank you. You guys got time to listen to this? Everybody in the class had to find something that happened to them personally, and your thesis was based around finding a solution to it. Her grandmother went to the medicine, true story, her grandmother went to the medicine cabinet, and you know the little amber-colored cylindrical pill bottles? Her grandmother inadvertently took the pills from her grandfather's. It caused a little bit of damage, but it certainly didn't hurt her. It wasn't fatal. And she said, that's the project. I'm going to redesign these little pills. So she challenged. She said, why are we putting up with this stupid little bottle where you have to read the type, turn it to read it around, you look at a medicine cabinet, they're all the same. So she submitted this for her thesis. They took it to a professional industrial designer in New York City. They perfected it, showed it to Target. Target bought it outright and put it in all their drugstores. This woman has gone on to have her own design studio. She's designing for the medical profession, and she designed a pill bottle that it's triangular. So from the side, it's flat and comes down to a circular top, sort of like the new ketchup bottles that sit upside down. So the top is at the bottom. It's flat so that the writing is on a flat plane, not on a circular one. She redesigned the entire typographical hierarchy of the information. What is the largest piece of information on a classic amber cylindrical bottle? There's two pieces that are the biggest pieces of type.
The number, probably.
Which number?
The prescription number.
No. The pharmacy phone number and the pharmacy name. The two things are important, but not the most important. So she reorganized the hierarchy of the information. On the back side, there's a little sleeve, and it can contain, if you want, a magnifying glass for you to read, like a piece of plastic for elderly people. And at the bottom are a series of colored rings, so that grandma's bottle now has an orange ring, grandpa's has a green ring, whatever. This was brilliant. So that was number three. She challenged, why do we put up with bad design? And she revolutionized how that gets done. Number four is to explore. We need to always constantly explore new things. And number five, most importantly, is we need to take risks. We get comfortable in the things we do and the things we like. We need to take risks. So I'm putting my mouth, what's the expression? I'm putting my words where my mouth. And I'm out on the road traveling for 28 days. And as I say, I have no idea where I'm going. But the prime purpose is for me to take. Now, everybody's okay photographer. I'm not saying I'm a great photographer. I just like to get better at it and better at observing. So if you're interested, you can go to, I do not like Facebook. I think it's ugly. I think it's full of, as a graphic designer, it's offensive. I think it's full of a bunch of stuff. Yeah, thank you. And I think it's full of a bunch of stuff that we just don't need to know about. So people have said, why aren't you on Facebook? And let me get off my soapbox. So I have my own blog, and I'm taking photos and I'm posting them each day. So if you're interested at all, just go to bobhambly.com/blog, and you can follow me for the next 28 days and see. Now, I only post like 3 or 4 images, and they're not touristy images, and that's all I'll say. So anyway, the main thing is stay curious, keep learning, keep pushing yourself, keep coming to these talks, keep learning about what other people are doing. It's all inspiring. And cheers.